new officers. Variable increases in a 1 year from 3% up to 9% for the new officers. An increase of 2.7% for year 2 and 5% for year 3. Training agreement, increase of the new hire training agreement from 36 months to 48-month term, and from 15,000 to 50,000. Separations prior to the 48-month will incur prorated recoupment of training cost. Health insurance adds Cadillac tax language. Education training program allows $520 stipend for associate's degree and $520 stipend for a 4 year of active duty military service to be combined. These items are currently non-cumulative. So the summary for the CBA cost impact for 2018 is $39,667.16. 2019 is $57,954.23. In the year 2020, it's $53,066.35. This article is recommended by the Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Is there any discussion on this article? Yes.
Just question on
Could we please have your name?
Timothy Stetson. I live on 119 Lesnick Road. Question on fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Why do we go from 57,000 to 53,000? Just a question as to why it decreases instead of increases.
If you look at the New Hampshire retirement system, the 2019 funds are up to $13,031.73, and the 2020 retirement is down $11,093.63, and Medicare is $642.07 in 2019, and in 2020 is $587.91 is where the difference comes from.
It decreases because of the state pension? Okay. Gotcha.
And yes, that last year is also a partial year.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a question, comment?
Move to restrict reconsideration of Article 14.
Motion has been made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 14. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Article 15. Chairman LeMay. Why don't you just stay up here?
I could, but I move Article 15 to the floor. Second. This article is for the dispatchers and clerks CBA. Again, this is a 3-year contract for dispatchers 1, 2, and 3, and clerks and legal clerks. Change of union representation, various changes throughout the to reflect the new union representation. Wages, placement on the top 16-step matrix similar to the townwide pay matrix, with the goal to attract and retain employees to high turnover positions. Variable increases in year 1 from 4% up to 16% for new hirees. A 2.5% increase for year 2 and a 2.5% increase for year 3. Work schedule, better defined process for shifts and rotation swap requests. Personal leave, change references from personal days to personal time and increase allowance from 12-hour per days. This was negotiated and accounted for both 8 hours and 12-hour work days in this unit. Health insurance, add the Cadillac language as well. Education training programs, expand eligibility for degree differential to include pre-hire degrees. The summary for SBA contract impacts in 2018 is $27,455.84. 2019 is $36,211.16, and in 2020, $19,392.44. This article is recommended by Selectmen and Budget Committee.
Are there any questions, discussion on Article 15? Motion has been made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 15. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Article 16, Selectman Georgiantis.
Good job, Mark. I move Article 16 to the floor.
I'll second that motion.
The Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund was established in 2008 for the purpose of helping defray the cost, single-year impact of a replacement cost of fire apparatus, which can run between $500,000 and $1 million. Capital Reserve Fund helps to spread that cost over multiple years to avoid spikes in the tax rate. This fund can also provide the town leverage in the form of local match when seeking grants to replace apparatus. This was the case in 2010 when the fire department was able to accept an assistance to firefighters grant to replace the town's obsolete ladder trucks with one tower ladder. In that instance, that required match dollars came from this fund. The fund currently has approximately $120,000, and the town is seeking to add $225,000 for future apparatus purchases. Over the years, this fund has also been used to replace a pumper tanker, command SUV, a UTV, and a rescue boat. Funding for this article is proposed to come from an unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxes. The unassigned fund balance after 2017 warrant articles and tax rate setting was approximately $6.9 million. This article is recommended by the Board of Selectmen and by the Budget Committee.
Any questions on Article 16? Is there a motion?
Motion to restrict consideration.
Second? Is there a motion been made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 16? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Article 17. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 17 to the floor.
I'll second.
Thank you. This article seeks to fund the Land Acquisition Capital Reserve Fund, which was established in 2017. The fund allows the selectmen to move swiftly if desirable property becomes available for sale throughout the course of the year. The selectmen are designated as agents to expend and could access this fund anytime during the year, contingent upon following RSA 41:14-A, which basically requires 2 public hearings before accessing those funds. Acquisition could be used for any municipal purpose except conservation, as there is a separate fund for that purpose, which is funded by the land use change tax. The fund was first used in 2017 to purchase 1 North Mass Street for future intersection improvements, leaving a balance of approximately $110,000. This article would be funded by unassigned fund balance, so no monies would be raised by taxation. This article is recommended by both the Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Floor is open for discussion. There's a question of how much is involved in this article.
Well, it's the balance of whatever monies are in the Capital Reserve Fund, which will vary from year to year, depending upon what money goes into it. 250,000 currently? Does that answer your question, Mr. Platt?
Thank you.
Oops, I gotta move to it. Oh, that's all right.
Are there any other questions on this article?
Then I'll move to restrict reconsideration of Article 17, Mr. Moderator. I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 17. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Article 18. Selectman Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 18 for the floor. Article 18 seeks to increase the road plan funding as provided in the operating budget in order to meet the goals identified in the capital improvement program. The town has been gradually reestablishing the amount of money or the budget for the road plan in order to hit a target of $1,425,000 by the year 2021. The CIP target would would fund the repair and restoration of our roads, 3 or 5% of our roads every year at that level of funding. The Department of Public Works will begin incorporating contracted projects to complement their in-house work on roads. The contractual costs are approximately 40% higher than doing it in-house with our own department labor and equipment. So additional funds are needed if we're to achieve the desired balance of work between public works and contractual work. The reclamation program of our roads will continue to target collector roads. They'll add locations where underground utilities and expansions or replacements are planned. Local traffic roads will augment that plan as time and budgets allow. This article is to be funded from the unassigned fund balance with no money to be raised by taxation. In the printed warrant article that you have, if you picked up one of the blue sheets, there was an error in that warrant article. It mentions the amount of $250,000. That essentially was a typographical error at the last moment, and because the amount of monies for the road plan was to be increased by $150,000. That amount of money was discussed before the Budget Committee. And there'll be an amendment shortly to take care of that. And finally, the article at the level which I'll have on the amendment, it was recommended by the Selectmen and the Budget Committee. Mr. Moderator?
Is there going to be an amendment? It needs to be in writing.
Thank you. I'll fill it out momentarily, but essentially I propose that an amendment to the change that is on that blue sheet will reflect the amount of $150,000. So, thank you. So, to abide by the moderator's rules, we'll do that in a writing moment.
That's the way we do it.
Yes.
And once we get that, we'll take the amendment up first and then go back to the main article.
May I ask? Hello?
Mr. Moderator, we have a resident wanting.
Yes.
Ruth
yeah.
Pierce, Pierce. I don't think you're clear. Rather than 250,000, you want the amount to be 150,000? Is that the amendment? You weren't clear, Mr. Pierce. Says the wife. You weren't clear.
I also have trouble at home. The printed article on the blue sheet does say $250,000. The amount of money that was discussed before the Budget Committee was $150,000. Due to the printed warrant reading 250, our only option is to submit an amendment to change the amount from 250 to 150.
Is this what you're proposing?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I've been handed this amendment, proposed amendment for Article 18. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $150,000 for Goffstown's road improvement program. Passage of this article will direct the selectmen to include this amount in future operating and default budgets of the town of Goffstown. This sum is to come from unassigned fund balance and no amount to be raised by taxation. This appropriation is in addition to Article 12, which has $825,000 budgeted for reclamation of roads. Now, is somebody going to move that article, that amendment to the floor?
Mr. Moderator, I move that amendment to the floor.
Okay. Do we have any explanation or discussion or questions about that amendment? All right, then we're going to vote on the proposed amendment. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're coming down to address.
Just a question here.
State your name, please.
Mike Smith, Pasture Drive.
Yes.
My question is, I understand the part about making it 150,000 to make it the same, make it what was presented before. It was not presented to have this as something that goes in the future, and I'm just trying to understand what that part of this amendment is.
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Is that mic on?
My question is, I understand that it's going from 250,000 to 150,000, which is the way it was presented to the Budget Committee. The part about it being added to all future budgets was not part of the presentation to the Budget Committee, and I'm just clarify what that's about and why that would have to be in as the part of the amendment.
I understand your question, Mike, and during the presentation, we had explained that we were trying to increase the fund from up to $1.4 million. And this vehicle gets us in moving in that direction. So the 150 goes into the budget and it continues on the road plan at the future budgets. Does that help you answer your question? So next year, when you
I just get concerned when we start committing to something for the next year when we're doing it this year. I appreciate the intent to get to work on the plan, but I don't recall that being a part of what we were talking about when we talked about this on the budget committee.
I'm sorry if you misunderstood that, but during the presentation, I remember we specifically went through that we were trying to increase that budget.
Thank you. Mike, I'd like to add that the same wording was on the warrant for last year, such that the additional amount would also continue into the future years in the operating budget. So we're doing the same
This would have been in
words.
the operating budget instead of a separate article, correct?
It would be part of the budget submitted a year from now as part of the operating fund for the
Thank
road
you.
plan.
Any further questions on this proposed amendment? All right. We're going to vote on this proposed amendment, and I'm going to read it to you one more time. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $150,000 for Goffstown's road improvement program. Passage of this article will direct the selectmen to include this amount in future operating and default budgets of the town of Goffstown. This sum to come from unassigned fund balances and no amount to be raised by taxation. This appropriation is in addition to Article 12, which has $825,000 budgeted for reclamation of roads. Now, all in favor of that article, or that amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the amendment passes. Now we'll go back to the main article. Is there any further discussion on the main article, Article 18?
Moderator, I move to restrict
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 18 as amended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Article 19. Selectman Georgianis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 19 to the floor.
Second.
Article 19. This article would fund the purchase of a production screener for processing large quantities of material necessary for the road plan and the development of athletic field complex on the former Barnard Perry property. The screener would be used for processing loam, clean fill, and gravel. DPW has, at current time, over 40,000 cubic yards of on-site material, of which over 23,000 yards is needed to build the first phase of the multi-purpose fields. Delaying the purchase would affect the field build-out schedule and will require higher rental cost of a contractor without the long-range benefit of owning the equipment. The long-term goal is to reduce the backlog of on-site materials and process new materials as it comes in. This should also reduce annual crushing costs over time. The article, the amount of $100,000 will be funded with unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxation. This article was recommended by the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Any questions or discussion on Article 19? Is there a motion to? Been a motion made, is it seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 19. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Article 20. Selectman Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 20 to the floor.
I'll second.
Thank you. This article seeks to extend the public water supply approximately 2,200 linear feet from Elm Street to the DPW facility and transfer station, which is located at 404 Elm Street. There's a number of reasons for doing this. First of all, the existing DPW well water is non-potable. It means you can't drink it, and has low capacity for washing vehicles after snowstorms to wash off the salt and sand so as to prolong the life of those vehicles. This project also allows for future fire protection. The current building cannot be expanded without a sprinkler system, so that in the future, if we desire to expand that building, we'd have the necessary water supply to install a sprinkler system. The project would also provide a source of water for the future athletic fields on the adjacent property. That's a long-going project well out into the future. I hope everyone's familiar with that. This would be a contracted project. The article amount is $250,000 and would be funded with unassigned fund balance, resulting in no monies to be raised by taxation. This article has been recommended by the Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Are there any questions on this article? Is there a motion?
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 20.
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 20. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Article 21. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 21 to the floor, please. This article is for the Goffstown Main Street program. This article would continue taxpayer support of the Goffstown Main Street program. Goffstown Main Street program's mission is to provide support, advice, and promotion to current and potential business owners and residents of the designated Main Street area using National Main Street Center four-point approach. The four-point approach revolves around principles of effective design, promotion, economics, restructuring, and organization as the keys to economic revitalization of the historic downtown. Many of you are familiar with the special events sponsored by Main Street, including the Old Home Day, concerts on the Common, Giant Pumpkin Regatta, Uncommon Arts of the Common, Friday Night Under the Lights, the Art Show-Off. These events bring business to the village as well as fostering a sense of community. Passage of this warrant article would provide $20,000 toward their 2018 budget of $72,500. This article was recommended by the Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Does anyone wish to speak on this article?
Move to restrict reconsideration of Article 21.
Been a motion made to restrict reconsideration of Article 21, and that motion has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Article 22, Selectman Pierce.
I move Article 22 to the floor.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Article 22 concerns Crispin's House. This article would continue the taxpayer support of Crispin's House Coalition for Youth. Crispin's House has provided services to youth and families in Gulfstown for over 25 years, providing a wide range of programs and opportunities to help kids make positive choices. The annual budget of Crispin's House is about $85,000. The warrant article provides $20,000. The organization works hard to raise the remaining funds through fundraising activities, community involvement, and grants. The article demonstrates a strong commitment from this community towards Crispin's House and helps their efforts. The newest program in their community workshop series is designed to give adults the information they need to help kids be safe. Other programs include accredited juvenile court diversion programs, the Volunteens Youth Forum, suicide prevention, and substance misuse prevention. This article is recommended to be passed favorably by the voters, by both the Selectmen and the Budget Committee.
Anyone care to address this article? Is there a motion here?
Mr. Moderator, I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 22.
There's been a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 22. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Article 23, Selectman Georgianis.
I move Article 23 to the floor.
Second.
So we're going to go from the youth to the elderly here. After a similar citizens' request article was amended at deliberative session in 2017, the Board of Selectmen have included the request again in 2018. The last change to the elderly exemption limit was made in 2007. To qualify, the taxpayer must not exceed income or asset thresholds. The current income limits are $35,000 for a single person and $50,000 for a married couple. The current maximum assets level is $150,000, which does not include the primary residence. For those who qualify, the tax exemptions are $45,000 for ages 64 to 74, $60,000 for ages 75 to 79, and $80,000 for 80 plus. The highest number of exemptions claimed was 223 in 2014, and fewer have qualified in each of the subsequent years. Social Security incomes and inflation have outpaced the elderly exemption income limits, increasing 15% over the same period. The article would increase the income limits by 7% for a single person, which takes it to $37,500, and to 10% for a married couple of $55,000. The increase in the exemption amounts by approximately 11% for ages 64 to 74 to $50,000, 13% for 75 to 79 to $67,500, and 13% for ages 80 to $90,000. Based on the surrounding town estimates, it is expected that this could increase the number of exemptions claimed by about 20, a tax impact of roughly $33,000. This article is recommended by the Board of Selectmen and by the Budget Committee.
Ernie?
Mike Smith again. This was not presented to the Budget Committee, so there is no recommendation. We'll have to deal with it that way. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mike, in the Budget Committee, there is no appropriation, so there's no Budget Committee recommendation required on this article. Mike, we've had a typo.
I just wanted to be clear that it was not presented. I'm not trying to say it had to be or should have been. I think it is a revenue deal, so I'll have to talk that outside.
Let me, just 1 second. Okay. Are there any other comments, questions? Yes, Barbara.
Thank you. Barbara Griffin, Merrill Road. Just for a clarification of the record, and I think we sort of covered this ground last year, if my memory serves me correct, the Budget Committee has absolute authority to review revenues. They traditionally have not, but that's certainly within their charge. And it is disappointing that these repeat warrant articles do not go to them, but that's a decision that I know historically has occurred. In regards to Article 23, I have a number of questions, and they are a precursor to some questions to 24. So is it my understanding from the presentation that this warrant article has been generated by the selectmen and not at the request of anybody? Okay, so I'm hearing yes for that.
That would be correct, Bob.
Okay. And currently, how many property owners claiming this exemption pay less than $1,000 in property taxes a year? Because I believe we have some property owners who pay pretty much nothing right now. So I'm wondering how many pay $1,000 or less as a result of this, if you have that information.
I'd like to recognize Scott Bartlett.
Hi, Scott Bartlett,
Yeah.
23 Warren Ave, Goffstown. I'm also the town assessor.
Yeah.
I can't give you the exact number. I would estimate probably about 25 to 30% would pay less than $1,000. That's a guess. If you want the exact number, I can provide it to you.
No, I'm talking about currently.
Currently,
So 25 to 30% of what?
of the total, we have 203 current recipients of the elderly exemption. I would say probably about 25% of those are paying less than $1,000. so
Are
about
any
50.
paying nothing?
How many are paying nothing?
Yeah.
Probably about half of that, about 25
Okay.
to 30.
So we've already got 223, of which about half of them are paying no property taxes.
About 25, no.
25%.
20, hold on. Your first question was how many are paying less than $1,000?
Yeah.
I would say about 25% of the total. And again, that's a guess.
And we have, just for clarification, because I'm trying to do numbers in my mind, we have about 223,
We have 203.
203, so 25% of that would be 50.
So that approximately 50 are probably paying less than $1,000.
Okay.
Of that 50, probably half of them aren't paying nothing.
So about 25.
Correct.
Okay, to your best estimate or guess, because we don't have the exact numbers. So we currently have, under this exemption, about 25 property owners paying nothing a year. And for clarification on this elderly exemption, it applies only to the named property owner, correct?
It would apply to the named property owner unless there's a life estate. If there's a life estate, the person who owns that life estate would also be eligible for the elderly exemption.
Right, but in that case, they're a titled owners. They're a titled owner of interest. So is it correct that if a titled owner lives in the property with another adult individual, that other adult is not considered at all in the equation for the elderly exemption? If there's no marriage relationship, the other adult is not factored in. Is that correct?
That would be correct. That is state
Okay.
law.
And there was an estimated tax impact reported of 33,000 from an increase of 20 additional houses. Is that what I heard? Households?
Yes, the estimate I'm looking at is I expect at least 20. It might be a little bit more than that. I would be surprised if it's a lot more of that. Because again, you got to understand, every year I'm getting new applications, I'm reviewing. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we have removed probably about 10 because they are now over the limit. There are ones that qualified starting in 2007. They now no longer qualify because their Social Security has increased enough that they are over that limit, so they have been removed. So I've removed about 10, so I expect those 10 would probably come back. Then looking at people that we have refused, people that have come in, applied for it, but were over. And I'd say over the last few years, there's probably been 6 or 7 that I have actually denied and said they could not qualify. So I've seen, so just there is about 16 or 17. I expect a few more. I'm estimating somewhere between 20 and 30.
Okay.
Which would bring us back to where we were in 2014.
And given the 200 and change, small change, that are currently on it, and given the increases that are occurring, what is the impact on the current, from the current households claiming the exemptions that will now be higher?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Well, the deduction limits, that's all right, forget that. I'm going to ask a different question. What did the Board of Selectmen calculate as being the net change from 2007 to come up with the changes that they've done in this warrant article? Well, you point out that this wasn't changed since 2007. I saw some puzzlement. So it hasn't been changed since 2007. You came up with an amount to change it. So I'm wondering what it was you balanced it against when you came up with the suggested amounts. Was it COLA? Was it inflation? What was it?
May I answer that one? Go ahead. Essentially what I did is I did look at cost of living increases, which have been about 15% since 2007. The recommended suggestion is a little bit less than that because, again, when you look at someone who's making, say, a married couple that's making about $50,000, not 100% of that is Social Security. That usually makes up about half to 60%. So we also looked at the other towns, surrounding towns, to see if we were in line with what similar towns were estimating. This would bring us a little bit higher than some of the surrounding towns, but not a lot. And again, one of the reasons that I would recommend that we go a little bit higher is because we're always behind on this, and other towns are always behind on this, because we're always reacting instead of being proactive. And most towns are in the same situation. One of the other things I noticed when I looked at the other similar towns is that our exemption amounts, the amount of the exemption itself, were less than most of the other towns. The other consideration was that when we looked at income assets, assets were about 30 to 40% higher in other towns. We're at 150,000. This particular article does not recommend increasing the asset limits. That's staying the same.
Okay. I understand where this came from. I'm not quite sure why. I understand that there's a desire to keep up with cost of living. I'm not sure that that would have been the standard I would have used. I understand you had one request on this last year and did pull the article. We already have taxpayers paying no property taxes as a result of this. We can have people living in the house that are unrelated and not on the deed, and or even be related and not on the deed, and their income and assets are not included. Additionally, I am familiar with the application process, and it is a matter of affidavit and tax returns. So I appreciate that it is not a significant amount of money, particularly when we look at 21 and 22, and I understand that. But I am disappointed in the article in regards to what it does. So that's my comment on it.
Anyone else?
May I make another comment,
Yes.
please? Last year, when this particular article was introduced to the selectmen, I did not attend the meeting because, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was a no-brainer. I looked at that article. I didn't think that it was going to be any reason not to pass it, so I was very surprised when that happened. When that happened, I immediately wrote a letter to the selectmen and apologized to them for not being there, and I started to offer them some of the reasons as why it should have passed. I wrote that letter again. One of the things that you have to understand with the elderly exemption is that it is designed in such a way it needs to be updated on a regular basis. We haven't done that. All this is doing is trying to keep up with what has changed over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Peter Grigorakakis. I'd like to offer an amendment to this article.
Needs to be in writing.
Can I bring it up? Would you like me to announce it, or?
Okay. I have an amendment here offered by Peter G. The amendment reads as follows. Shall the town keep the elderly exemptions the same? Now, is there any discussion on that amendment? This is what it says. Shall the town keep the elderly exemptions the same?
Mr. Moderator, point of order, doesn't this require a number of signatures in order to go forward?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't this require 5 signatures to go forward?
Not for an amendment.
Not for an amendment?
No. Okay, would you like to address your amendment?
Mr. Moderator, point of order, I didn't hear a second. Was there a second?
Did I ask for a second? Did you ask for a second yet?
Is there a second?
Second.
And who seconded it?
Good job, George.
Okay.
Just the only reason I even have to bring that up is we did Groundhog's Day was on Friday, right? Last year we discussed this, and we did say that we would try to bring this to the budget committee in the following year because it does affect revenue, and we do have oversight over revenue. So I just hope that in future years, budget committee is given an opportunity to review this. That's all.
Anyone else? All right. Then we'll vote on the amendment. The amendment. Okay, well, that,
I want to just make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So what we're talking about amending here is the current level for a single person is $35,000. We're raising that proposed level to $37,500, which is $2,500. A married couple, we're taking it from $50,000 to $55,000, which is $5,000 difference. Social Security cost of living since 2007 has gone up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% plus. So our adjustments are not out of line, and it's only right that we help our elderly as well as our young. Thank you.
Scott Bartlett again. There's a part of this article that we didn't discuss, and that has to do with the increase in the actual exemption amounts. To me, that's probably the most important part of this particular article. One of the things that's happening this year is an update of value. Every 5 years, we are required by law to update. We will be reviewed this year by the Department of Revenue Administration. I know all of you know property values have been increasing. Okay, the last time we did an update was only 2 years ago, but property values have increased by about 15% since then. So we will see an increase in our assessed values. Now, what does that do? For most people, it increases your assessed values, it lowers your tax rate. But for the elderly, that have an exemption, if we don't have a corresponding increase in the amount of the exemption, they will be penalized. Their taxes will go up as a result of the assessments going up. There's no corresponding way to increase those assessments at the same rate to increase the exemptions at the same rate that we're increasing the assessment unless we do it this way. So one of the things I'm doing here is I'm trying to, again, that part of it is revenue neutral, okay? Because the recommendation here would be increasing the exemptions the same amount as the expectation of the assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Richard Manzo. My question is, in reference to the previous point that was made, that the town has been reactive rather than proactive in solving the issue of elderly exemptions. Is there a projected timeline as to when this will need to be adjusted again? I noticed it was 11 years ago last time. Will this adjustment last another 11 years, or will it last longer or a shorter amount of time?
That depends on who brings it up again. I mean, last year it was a citizen that brought it up, and this year the Board of Selectmen took the torch and brought it forward. But it should be updated on a regular basis, but that doesn't always happen.
Okay.
Amy Hunteman, Huntemann. I just wanted to ask how does this affect the budget? If more citizens apply, like what kind of do you have a sense, like in dollars and cents, what it'll reflect? Because it will, you have to offset those costs. If we're paying more to help people, that's great. But then we need to know how much we're in for so that the rest of us that are picking up that burden know what to expect too. That's all I want to know.
As stated earlier, and I think the assessor, Scott Bartlett, also said it's about $33,000.
Okay, but what does that mean for like the tax rate?
Go ahead, Scott, you want to address it?
I'm just trying to get clarification.
If we were to add 20 people this year, it would be about 2 cents on the tax rate.
Thank you.
Al Baines.
Well,
I want to urge the voting people here tonight to vote against this amendment. Let's leave this alone. This is a town having compassion for the people in this town that need it. So let's leave what the selectmen have put in there. I urge you to go to the budget committee with it next year so that this can be reviewed a little better. But please vote against this amendment and leave it alone. Let's have some compassion for the elderly in this town that need it.
Brad Parkhurst, 81 South Mass Street. You all know me. You all know where I live. I do not qualify on any of the exemptions, but I appreciate the selectmen deciding to raise the level. I am opposed to this amendment vehemently, and I think you should spend more time moving forward and looking at the elderly in the town, and do include the budget committee in the process. Thank you.
Peter Grigorkakis. I just want to make it clear that the reason that I offered this amendment was not because I don't want to do things for our seniors in this town. I believe that if we had the opportunity to review this, we would probably have a good recommendation on here from the budget committee. The issue is that we had discussed in prior year, or last year, needing to have the budget committee review this in the future, and we did not. This is the exact same amendment that passed last year and was on the ballot. So I just want to make that clear to everyone in the audience, that we don't really like being pitted up against our seniors as the budget committee.
Anyone else? All right, we've got a motion for the previous question that's been seconded. So all in favor of ending debate, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll go ahead and vote, and we're going to do it by a voice vote to start with. If anybody has a problem with that, let me know. Okay, all in favor, now let me read the amendment. We're voting on this proposed amendment, which says, this is on Article 23. The amendment that's been offered reads as follows: shall the town keep the elderly exemptions the same? Question mark. That's the whole amendment. So all in favor of that amendment, say aye. All opposed to the amendment, say no. No. The amendment is defeated. We'll go back to the main article. Is there any further discussion on the main article? Article 23. No. You made a motion to restrict reconsideration of 23, and it's been seconded. Yes. All in favor of restricting reconsideration of Article 23, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We'll go to Article 24. Selectman Pierce.
I move Article 24 to the floor.
Second.
Article 24 concerns the all veterans tax credit. New legislation in 2016 authorizes municipalities to expand the existing veterans tax credit to include anyone who has served 90 days active duty and was honorably discharged, or the spouse or surviving spouse of such a resident. By law, the all veterans tax credit, the critical word there is all veterans versus just veterans. The all veterans credit must be the same as that standard amount for veterans, which is currently set at $500 in this town. By law, there could be a 3-year phase-in of this all veterans tax credit. This article, though, proposes to implement the tax credit in a single year. The expected impact of this expansion from standard veterans to all veterans would be 25 to 30 new applicants who would then qualify. Currently, there's about 700 veterans in our town that qualify for the standard exemption, and this would add 25 or 30 more. This article was recommended by the selectmen.
Is there any discussion on this article?
Barbara Griffin, I had some questions, but the presentation that was just given, I have to ask this first. Where did you come up with a number of 25 to 30? Because in my opinion, that is a gross understatement of who would now qualify for this credit.
Mr. Motter, I'd like to ask the town assessor to answer that question.
And perhaps for clarification, when answering it, we can distinguish what the qualifications are now for this credit as compared to what an all veterans credit of only 90 days service would do.
Okay. Scott Bartlett, town assessor. I'll answer your second question first. Right now, in order to qualify for the veterans credit, you need to have served at least 90 days of active duty during declared times of foreign war. In the last 100 years, that constitutes about 52 years over that period. Since the Persian Gulf started in...
Scott, could I ask you to keep your mouth closer to the microphone?
I apologize.
Since the Persian Gulf War started in 1990, that period has been continuous. So for the last almost 28 years, any veteran who served 90 days of active duty qualifies for the veteran's tax credit. The difference would add, this particular one would add those periods where there was not declared foreign war. So that would be times between Vietnam and the Persian Gulf. It would also be the small period of time between the Korean War and the veterans and the Vietnam War. And not that we have a lot of veterans left, bless their soul, between World War II and the Korean War. That's about a 48-year period, again, over the last 100 years. As far as where the numbers come from, what I did is I spoke with a number of towns, and I asked them, the towns that passed this last year, and I asked them what their experience was. I spoke with 8 communities responded to my request. They are ones that did pass it last year. They saw anywhere from a 1.3% increase in their number of veterans to a maximum of 7.3%. Based on our numbers, last year we had 687 veterans, so that would range, using those percentages, would range from 9 to 50. So 50 would be the max, 9 would be the lowest. Our estimate of the average is about 30, is what we would estimate. As far as the changes, if it was the maximum, that would have an impact of $25,000, which is about 1.5 cents on the tax rate.
Are there any further questions, comments?
Just a question. My name is Scott Rose, 57 Range Road. With respect to this exemption, is there any difference in terms of qualifications, let's say between a veteran who is now an airline pilot making $200,000 versus someone who makes, as a veteran, making $50,000? Are they both entitled to that tax credit, or is it based upon income?
The answer is no. There's the additional income or the income that the resident is earning through other means does not impact the application.
Thank you, Barbara Griffin. Where did this request come from? Did it originate from the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, Barbara.
Pam Decker, Gorham Pond Road. I just have a question pertaining to the 3-year phase-in for this plan. Is there any reason why we're not considering a 3-year phase-in for the $500 maximum?
The answer, from my perspective, I haven't discussed that with the board, but my perspective would be that the number of applicants is relatively small, from 700 veterans being recognized for this credit and maybe adding 25 or 30 at the average. That is not, the impact isn't significant enough to spread it over 3 years, to slowly increase it to the rest of the town. Do it all at once.
But that 25 to 30 is just a hypothetical based on...
It was the best estimate the assessor could come up after polling the impact of 8 other communities with the experiences that they saw when introducing the same warrant article.
Okay, and do we know what those communities have adopted?
You referring to the amount of the exemption?
Yes.
I believe 500 is the maximum that is allowed by state law.
Is that what all the
There are communities that have lesser amounts of exemptions, but 500 is the maximum that can be allowed.
So did other communities adopt the maximum, is what I'm asking? Neighboring or...
Well, I don't have the list of which communities have 200, 300, 400, or 500. So I can't answer that.
I know, I did a little bit of research on this. I do know Hooksett, kind of neighboring community, only adopted a 300, while Bedford did adopt the 500. Manchester's a larger community, they're adopting the 3-year plan, phase-in plan, possibly. It's on the books.
Once again, by law, when we adopt this for all veterans, as opposed to standard veterans, it has to be the same amount that the community has already established. Our community already established 500. You referenced Hooksett, their level was set at 300, so they kept it at 300.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right. Is there a motion?
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 24.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 24. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a point of order and perhaps some clarification. If we go back to Article 23, there is an amendment proposed. The amendment was voted down, but I don't recall a vote on the underlying article itself. Can you just clarify that for us, please?
Well, no. If you go back to the rules, we don't vote to pass or defeat articles. That happens in March.
But move it, okay. Yeah, I understand that. I misspoke, but my point was.
We're all, no, we didn't vote on the article, but we wouldn't. No, the amendment was defeated. It was offered and defeated by vote, okay? Then we went back for anyone who wished to discuss the main article again. I don't know if there was or not, but then we just move on.
Yep, thank you for the clarification.
There's no vote on the main article.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Let's see, Article 25. Oh, you're still here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. 2 more to go. Article 25 concerns the Police Special Detail Revolving Fund. And I move Article 25 to the floor.
Second.
The intent of this article is to expand the use of the Police Special Detail Revolving Fund. That fund was established by voters in 2013. 100% of the revenues from police details is deposited into that fund, and the selectmen are the agents for the expenditures from that fund for expenses. Discussion during the 2013 deliberative sessions did not explicitly state, that's when the revolving fund was set up, the discussion at that time did not explicitly state that the purchases of vehicles or equipment could be made from the fund. So approximately 1/3 of the special details conducted by our police department also request a cruiser, and revenue is appropriately collected for the presence of a cruiser at the traffic control site and deposited into that fund for expenses. That fund is slowly growing as the vehicle portions of those expenses have not been spent or withdrawn. The fund balance at the present time is a little over $95,000. It's $95,173 at the end of 2017. So the Special Detail Revolving Fund can now, if passage with this article in the future, can be used to offset revenue, offset the revenue source for vehicle and equipment purchases. This article was recommended by both the Selectmen and Budget Committee. Nope, yes, we didn't.
Mike Smith, this is getting to be a regular occurrence, but this was not presented to the Budget Committee, just to clarify that.
Thank you, Mike. I stand corrected. It was recommended by the Selectmen.
And just so that the record is clear, the actual warrant states only that it was recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Is there any discussion on the article? Is there a motion?
I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 25.
Second.
There's been a motion made, seconded, to restrict reconsideration of Article 25. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Article 26 is a petitioned article.
Charles Tentis, 28 Knowlcrest Road in Goffstown. This was submitted by petition, Article 26, and I did submit it. It's concerning for the town to vote and raise the appropriate $338,973 for the purpose of adding 8 additional full-time firefighter EMTs or firefighter paramedics to the town's fire department. This additional staff will increase daily staffing levels at the fire department to allow for full-time staffing around the clock on a 24-hour basis. The amount raised equals the cost from July through December of 2018. If approved, the cost associated to adding the additional full-time firefighters will become part of the annual operating budget in subsequent years. This appropriation is in addition to the operating budget. I'd like to just share a couple other things, too, for this warrant article. Thank you to the scores of Goffstown voters and taxpayers who have made the effort to improve the fire department and the level of services we can offer with this warrant article. Many of the same people have sought out more information on how the fire department...
Hold on, just 1 second.
Sure.
We need to have the article seconded.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Can I make a motion to put it to the floor?
Yes, and did I hear a second?
Thank you.
Okay.
State your name, please.
Okay, now you may continue.
Thank you. Forgive me, this is the first one I've done, so I apologize.
It's okay.
Many of the same people have sought out more information on how the fire department currently operates and provides services to our community. Most showed interest. We're surprised to find out that our fire department does not currently offer fire and EMS services around the clock using full-time staff at our fire stations, which are namely Church Street, Station 18, and Station 19 on Mass Road. In fact, the Goffstown Fire Department does not utilize full-time staffing to respond to fires and medical emergencies at night, that being from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. In fact, the Goffstown Fire Department completed a comprehensive staffing and operations study in 2016. The study concluded that our fire department was not adequately staffed, especially at night, to effectively respond to fires and certain medical emergencies. In fact, the study recommended to hire an additional 8 full-time firefighter EMTs, working with a small number of part-timers to allow for around-the-clock staffing of 2 of the town's fire stations that I just named. The fire chief presented the findings of the study to the Board of Selectmen in 2016. The Board of Selectmen voted to hire numerous part-time firefighter EMTs to minimally staff 2 of the fire stations during the evening and overnight hours. In 2017, the fire department commenced the part-time staffing program and experienced the following issues. The number of applicants that were qualified was small. The process, the vetting process, complete background checks and training part-time staff was very time-consuming. Many of the part-time staff, once trained and outfitted to cover shifts, left and moved on to explore full-time endeavors at other fire departments and other communities. Many part-time employees have not committed to the staffing needs of the fire department was another one. In fact, over the past 10 years, the Goffstown Fire Department has seen a decline in on-call and part-time staff. Reasons? Demands to become certified as a firefighter and EMT, which takes hundreds of hours in training, unable to manage work demands with the demands of the fire department, overall reduction of leisure time, increasing family demands, increasing job-related exposure to toxins, diseases, and serious injury, or even worse, cancer. In fact, the Goffstown Fire Department will still need some of its on-call firefighter EMTs, even when adding this additional full-time staff. And then finally, the one that really brought it to my attention when we came forth with the petition, out of the top 25 most populated cities and towns in New Hampshire, Goffstown ranking 14th at almost 18,000 residents, is the only fire EMS department that does not offer around-the-clock full-time services and staffing with full-time firefighters from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I believe this is the right thing to be doing. I know it's not recommended by the Budget Committee or the Board of Selectmen, but I still think for the size of our community that we need to be getting this coverage overnight so that any of us that may need the fire department, whether it be for a home, a building fire, commercial building, entrapment in a vehicle for a motor vehicle accident in the middle of the night, that we can't always be depending on call people to get up, gather their wits, get in their car, drive to the firehouse, and hope that there's another firefighter to be able to drive that engine or ladder truck to the incident. We need to have these men and women on site and ready to roll in those vehicles to take care of the situation. Finally, we're not a small town like Mayberry RFD on the Canadian border. We're the size of a city. We're bigger than Exeter, we're bigger than Lebanon, we're bigger than Laconia. And I think it's time we get that around-the-clock service given to us, just like the police department, for the fire department, where we have full-time trained firefighters, EMTs, in the firehouse all night long, ready to roll at a moment's notice. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Emily Sandblade. I'm currently a member of the Budget Committee, but I'm not speaking as a representative of the Budget Committee. We reviewed this particular allocation very, very carefully when it was presented to the Budget Committee, and we believe that there's definitely some issues that the fire department has brought up, but we generally believe that this is not an appropriate solution to those issues. As a result, I said I was not representing the Budget Committee.
She can go ahead, continue.
Okay, thank you very much. As a result, I'd like to offer an amendment to change the appropriation to $0.
Do you wish to address your amendment? Or have you said all you wish to? Is there a second? Okay. Moved and seconded to the floor. The amendment reads as follows. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $0. This is for warrant Article 26. Now, who wishes to be heard on that?
Mr. Moderator, I think there's going to be a request for secret ballot. It's underway.
There is. 5 signatures right now.
What? Do I have? Ruth Pierce? I'm just interested why the selectmen did not approve this article. I thought the representative here gave a very good case, so I'm just wondering why, what the reasoning was. Something beyond money? What was the reason? What were the reasons? Thank you.
I guess, unfortunately, it's not beyond money. This article, number one, this article only addresses 6 months. When you look at the total article, you're closer to $700,000 in the second year. And of course, after that, it keeps increasing with the wage increases. So it was, at this time, the Board of Selectmen took a decision not to support this. And as a Budget Committee rep, I can pretty much tell you that was the sentiment at that time also.
Barbara?
Thank you, Barbara Griffin. I just want to speak to the article itself. I understand that you're in the process of doing the amendment request. I want to thank the chief for giving me a copy of the report that was referred to by the petitioner. I had a chance to take a look at that report after the Budget Committee meeting on this because I was interested. And again, I thank him and I thank the members of the department, of the fire department, who are here in uniform and otherwise to support their department. And I appreciate their support of the town. This has been an ongoing issue in this town for many years. And I was a former member of the Board of Selectmen when such requests came forward and studies were performed. As a result of those studies many years ago, what the then Board of Selectmen elected to do was to go to 24/7 ambulance coverage because a review of the data at that time indicated that the 24/7 need was in ambulance calls. Many of you will see trucks out. It is very difficult to distinguish when a call for service occurs, even then, with the data that we had as to exactly what type of an event the call was responding to and what vehicles were needed at the scene. The report that was recently done appears to be a volunteer ad hoc group, and again, I thank those members. I can't remember all of them, but I do recall that they were all fire department members or former fire department members. And the data in the report failed to distinguish in any way between fire response calls and ambulance response calls. So coming from my previous experience on the board, looking at the detailed numbers, it was impossible to look at this report and determine what was happening for calls for service out of our stations. Because the reality is then, and I suspect now, but I couldn't tell from this report, that the majority of calls are for ambulance or non-fire related services. So I appreciate that the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee, in reviewing this request, might have felt that they didn't really have enough information to address it. The reality is that the safest solution for everyone is to have a fire station fully staffed right next to their home. That would be the safest result of everything, along with the cruiser on your street. The reality is, as a community, we don't expect that and we don't pay for that. So the Board of Selectmen, on our behalf, go through our departments and figure out what expenses are reasonable to provide for services, and it may be that some of us feel that 24/7 coverage is needed. I do not think it is. I didn't think it was needed years ago when this issue was before the Board of Selectmen and I was on it, and I cannot say that it's needed after looking at the data in the report. I also would point out that I believe the costs are grossly understated in this article. As was pointed out, it is for a 6-month period, which is all that's required by law, so the article does exactly what it needs to do. But I will tell you that budgets include the prior year staffing, and this budget year is going to be particularly difficult because we have an assessment going on. We all know we have issues going on with our school tax rate that will be going on in the upcoming year, and we have a number of articles going on that the reality is to assess what your tax impact is going to be on your house is next to impossible at this point in time based on all those things happening right now. So I understand how it was presented. It does not, to my understanding, include what would be future requirements for the community for retirement costs. I will tell you from Concord that retirement costs are being put down to local communities more and more for our civil service because at the state level there's some opinion we don't have the money for it, and there has been an assessment by members in Concord that communities should be responsible for the people they hire. So that if you're contributing to the retirement fund and you've only had 10 full-time employees as a community, why should your rate be helping to subsidize communities who hire full-time employees at a much higher rate? So there's all sorts of other discussions going on. I'm getting a little off the terms of the article, but my assessment of history and the current report and the data is that this is not appropriate at this time, that the Budget Committee and the Board of Selectmen have made an appropriate recommendation on this article. I understand that there is a motion on the floor. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Tim Stetson, live over on Lesnick. So just in response here and a little bit background for myself, my wife and I moved to the town last May. As you can probably tell just by looking at me, you know, young kid here and looking to settle down, start a family. And really when we were looking in the area, we were looking at Merrimack, Goffstown, Amherst, the general vicinity of this area. And I can speak fairly confidently that had I known the town did not have 24-hour fire coverage, we probably would not have moved here. I wish, like Barbara, I lived in a world where I never had to worry about a fire overnight, but I live in the real world, and I also remember back in October, there was a fire at around 5:30 a.m., which was right in that coverage that we're talking about. Destroyed a landmark place that I actually fell in love with when I moved here. I think it's important, at least, that we let sort of the New England town government occur, not just shoot down a warrant article because we think it might be too brazen, and actually just let it go to town vote. I think as a citizenry, it's the most responsible decision to make, to give it to the entire town, not to just leave it to a assembled group of maybe 60 people to say no on an amendment, when in reality, you know, we live in a town of 15,000. So I would urge people here tonight to vote against this amendment, to let this go to town, and then really let that be the deciding factor. If you don't want this to pass, do the democratic fashion and stand outside with a sign and say no, instead of just trying to have a manipulated group of 60 people with an amendment put it down.
Chief.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. My name's Richard O'Brien. I'm your fire chief. I also live here in town. First of all, I'd like to thank the citizens and taxpayers of our community for the support given to our fire department year after year. Secondly, I would like to thank the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee for the support and hard work, really appreciating the difficult choices they make and weighing in the cost of providing services to our town. on the other hand, as fire chief, it has always been my responsibility to inform the governing boards and committees and the public of the current needs of your fire department, focusing on the best methods, equipment, and apparatus to accomplish our mission in an effective manner. In 2016, we did complete the study that you folks are talking about. It was a comprehensive study that looked at our experience in calls and the data. And the data did break down our experience with fire calls, in EMS calls, and so on. Without a doubt, Mr. Gifford was correct. Majority of our calls are EMS-related calls, but they're not 90% of our calls. They're not 80% of our calls. They're not even 70% of our calls. They're approximately 60% of our calls. So 40% of our calls are fire-related, so we can't ignore them. Okay, so what we're noticing is there has been an uptick in activity, in not just in EMS calls, but in fire calls and vehicle accidents. On the same time, we're seeing, as the uptick of increasing calls, we're seeing the downtick of personnel, available personnel. And as it was stated eloquently by the petitioner, because he obviously had a copy of a report, that because of family demands, work demands, whether it's known that you have increased injury potential being a firefighter, you have an increased potential for exposure to diseases as a EMS responder. And now that now there's many studies are coming out, unfortunately, that firefighters and responders have at least 10 times more chances of occupational cancer. And because of that, it's very tough to get folks to volunteer or come out at least part-time to help our community. It's not to say that they want to. They really want to support our community at all costs, but I understand why they possibly might not want to. Barbara also spoke on, we've been through this before, and back in 2005 and 6, looking back at Old Town reports, and there was a petition article at the time to go ahead and try to hire 18 full-time firefighters, 18 full-time firefighters at that time to go around-the-clock coverage with full-time coverage, and that failed. But since then, our call volume has increased 25%. Our population has increased 5 to 6%, and we're doing it with pretty much the same amount of personnel we have on hand today, actually less at night. So that's the reason why actually the warrant article that was petitioned was the one I proposed to the Budget Committee and the selectmen at the time, and it was not voted to bring forward. So it's at that point I would like to confirm that the fact that the language you see in that petition article will reflect it in the ability for us to go 24 hours using full-time and part-time personnel. The reason why that language initially, when I proposed it, was for the 6 months worth, is an operational decision. The reason why you do that is because for us to take on that amount of people at a period of time, it's difficult to do that from day one after the vote. And so we need a few months to vet applicants and choose them properly and get them started. And that takes 2 to 3 months to do. And so to commence them in July. And that's the reason why it was proposed initially for that, without the understanding that it was going to cost a full year the following year. But again, that was the cost of us going to 24 hours. So with that said, thank you for your support. Again, Selectman, Moderator, and the Budget Committee, thank you again.
Scott Bartlett, 23 Warren Ave. I just had one question for the chief. How many current employees do we have, full-time employees? This would increase by 8, but what is our current complement?
Thank you, Scott. We currently have 12 shift full-time firefighter EMT paramedics. This would get us up to, again, 18. And with the complement of part-timers that we currently have on staff, that would equate us to be able to go to 6 staffed full-time firefighters per day. So we'd have 3 staffed at the Churchview station and 3 staffed at the Pinarville station. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly Boyer, Gorham Pond Road. I'm also a member of the Budget Committee, and I received permission from our chair just to state for the record that the Budget Committee did in fact get adequate information to make a decision on this article and if we supported it or not. That being said, personally, I feel that what we took away from this is that there were multiple steps that Chief O'Brien took to bring this article to the Budget Committee, to the Board of Selectmen, and the end result where we received it was in this current form. That being said, the 6 months that is being covered in this warrant article is something that the Budget Committee could not accept in its current form. At that meeting, and if you go back and watch it, you can see all the really good discussion that happened around that. We did ask that perhaps this be looked at in a different way, whether it be a gradual increase. Chief O'Brien let us know that there's potential for grant opportunity for this in the future. So this is, I believe, not something that any of us are opposed to, but in its current state and the cost associated with it, that it just needs to be looked at differently. So as a Budget Committee member, I stand by that. However, as a resident, I'm all for letting the taxpayers vote on that. So thank you.
Barbara Griffin, I'm only going to take a second of everybody's time here, and thank you for indulging me again. I just wanted to clarify that I was not speaking to the motion before. I thought I was pretty clear that I was speaking as to the article itself. Just to clarify that for everyone, and welcome to everybody to our town. It's unfortunate when you move to a town and you don't have all the information that apparently you wanted, and maybe we'll try to think of some way to make sure that you do have what you need. And I'm pretty sure I live in reality, but I'll admit I'm a little distorted sometimes. But I try to live in reality, so thank you very much for everybody's time.
Peter Grigorakakis again. Kind of echoing Kelly, another fellow member of the Budget Committee. Not speaking in my role as Budget Committee, I will say to everyone in the room, I would personally recommend voting against the amendment. Although in my capacity as Budget Committee member, I did not support as it was proposed by the Chief or the petition for other reasons of our own. I do believe that the information is given there. The amount raised equals the cost from July through December 2018. If approved, the costs associated to adding the additional full-time firefighters will become part of the annual operating budget in subsequent years. What I need to do as just a resident is trust that the rest of the people that are going to show up are going to read the warrant article and are going to do the math themselves. And if they really value that, okay, Dave. If they really value this expenditure, then they will vote yes. If they don't, they will vote no. And I need to trust that the taxpayers and the voters will make that choice on their own. Thanks.
All right, anyone else?
Kathy Coughlin, 83 New Boston Road. Kind of a question for the chief. Does the $300,000 include insurance money? Because I know insurances are pulled out or in a whole separate line item. Or is insurance on top of that? Is that just the pay lines?
When I proposed the this number initially in front of the selectmen and the budget committee, this figure included wages, all the salary figures that roll up with that, with Medicare and so forth, retirement, and for health insurance.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on the proposed amendment? And let me remind you, the amendment reads as follows. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $0. This is on Article 26. Now, I've been given a request for a secret written ballot signed by enough people. It only needed 5, but I got 6. So here's the way we're going to do it. There's 2 columns here, and there's a ballot box on each side. Okay, now you come down with your voter card and hand it to the clerk, and the clerk will initial it and return the card to you and then give you a ballot. Then you will mark your ballot and then hand your ballot to the clerk at the ballot box, and he will cast the ballot.
Would you please ask the counters to come down?
Would the counters please come down? Pardon?
Just a question on the vote.
Yes.
If you vote yes, that means you're voting for change the number to 0. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the warrant article as is.
That's right. Your understanding is correct. If you vote yes on the proposed amendment, you are voting to change the appropriation to $0. If you vote no, you're basically saying leave the article the way it is.
You said you had 6 signatures, right?
Hmm?
You said you had 6 signatures for this one? Right? In your minutes, you're saying for the secret ballot, this request must be made by 7.
I'll sign it.
No, I'm only saying is that you had, just for point of order, is that it was 5 for writing, but 7 for secret. It's just the way that I interpret it.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
just to make sure that's on.
Do you want a 7 signature?
Yeah.
I'll sign it.
That's okay.
We'll get the 7.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that we're going by
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
point of order is.
Yes.
Should I wait?
No, you might as well get in line and vote.
It's not your pile.
Call us and here. You're more than welcome to one of mine.
I didn't know you made
Howdy. How's it going? Good, how are you? I like the scruff. Growing in good. Good. What's the matter?
Ready?
Yep. I think it's growing in good on it. It's going great. All right. Suspicious.
How are you? Thank you.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you. She submits it like on Sunday at night because she's busy herself.
Thank you. I'm not.
Thank you, Mrs. Cupcake Lady. She makes the best cupcakes, Al.
I love
Cupcakes
controversy.
are the best. Am I supposed to rip it or just check it, or?
It's just not fair for this small group of
Well, that's what I
people
said. You can't rip.
to make such a large decision on what we're looking
Oh,
at.
boy.
Let it go to the
We're
voters
gonna-
of town. Let the voters of town, in this town, make the decision, yes or no.
Hold it.
Last call for voting. If you haven't voted, please come down and vote.
So they'll get counted, nothing's gonna happen. I'll take out. Okay, I just didn't want to.
I'm going to find out. Has everybody that wants to vote voted? If you haven't, get down here and do it quick, because we're going to be closing up the voting. Kathy said 60 something? But that's going to include me, which I don't know.
Yeah, you're the tiebreaker. That's right, you're the tiebreaker if anything happens. Same lady in the same motion.
Yes or no? Roy Elderson comes.
You were fine until I brought the petition out, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of strangled.
Sorry. So that you know, my name is not on that. I want to move it forward so we can have justice with our system.
Chief Justice of the American Way. Huh? Take over? Oh, okay.
So Fred, I'm glad I'm hearing what you're
I've had to say that a few times.
Okay. Come back to order, please. All right, the amendment received 14 yes votes and 45 no votes. So the amendment is defeated, or a total of 59 votes. Now that's a pretty sad sack. I mean, considering how many people live in town, we should have more turnout than that. But all the numbers are correct, and so that's the end of that amendment. Now we'll go back to the main article. Is there any further discussion on the main article?
The only thing I'd like to do is motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 26.
Well, if, once I decide that we're done debate, is your hand up? All right, so I take it there's no further discussion. There's been a motion made to restrict reconsideration, which has been seconded. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, then that's it. Now, and that's the last article that we are considering tonight. Thank you all for coming. And I need a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Yes, sir.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.